Hello and welcome to Let's Talk Bohurt. On this episode, we are going to be talking about authenticity. It's often a big elephant in the room that scares new fighters. And there's always a bit of animosity about it. So we're going to look into it and see if it's really that much of an issue. With me today, I've got Piers Gorey.
Afternoon.
And I've also got George here with us.
Hey there.
So if you guys could just give a quick rundown of who you are, what you've done in the sport, so on and so forth, just so those at home can know who's talking. So Piers, yourself.
So showed up almost 4 years ago to the day now for one session, and then the next session I was asked, "What are you doing next weekend?" I said, "Nothing." It's brilliant. We've got some armour for you. Come to France. And that was my first Bohurt tournament. I came from a reenactment community where HMB was seen as mad lads. And looked like a bit of fun, so I decided to join in. So I've been with the sport ever since. I'm the captain of the Legion team in the UK, and the vice captain of Primus, which is the international team that we a load of smaller teams in the UK field fight into. But yeah, I've got an interest in AC and looking to be one of the AC reps for the UK in the near future.
Cool, happy days. And yourself, George?
Hi, I'm George. I'm captain of the Northern Wolves HMB team. I've been fighting for about 3 years, came over from the HEMA side of things when I got a bit bored of that community. And I've stuck about ever since. Did my first Battle of the Nations last year, along with IMCF. And yeah, I've been traveling about with these two, going to different tournaments as Primus.
Cool, happy days. So let's talk Bohurt then. Authenticity. It's, as I said before, it's an elephant in the room a lot of the time. It really scares people. They don't know what's going on with it sometimes, and they question its use. But from what you can see on the screen there, this is why we need it, I think. Those of you that can't see, if you're listening, I've just got a photo of myself from when I started the sport, and it doesn't look good. But what about yourself, guys? What are you finding the big issues at the moment, and how people are reacting to AC?
I think it's a perception issue to start with. I mean, AC, to start off with, it's not just about authenticity in itself, it's also about safety. So whilst we all enjoy this sport and I enjoy battering and being battered, I have no intention of being hospitalised at the end of each and every fight, and nor does anyone else who goes into that list. And AC is not just a measure about looking correct for what we're doing, but also a measure of safety in within each other and the teams, and being just safer when we're doing it. So a good chunk of it is perception, and they're seen as the big bad wolf that says you can't have fun. And a good chunk of that is from past generations who've no intention of changing their ways, decided they know best. And as some of the photos that we'll show during this conversation beautifully illustrate, actually, there's a reason for AC, there's a reason for safety concerns, and they do show their worth, and they are worth something. So, point in case, this photo in front of us now is my first tournament. This is literally the weekend after I started the sport. And I've been thrown in some kit. Next to me is Ed, who's currently a fighter in White Company, and next to me is a chap called Stephen, who's afraid I've not seen hide nor hair over in a while. But if you look at the kit I'm wearing there, it's all splint, it's not anatomically correct, it's just gutters wrapped around me. It is poorly made, it is badly maintained. And if I was wearing that, like, I wore that to my first tournament, and at the time of the first tournament, it wasn't a problem. But if I wore that today to any form of tournament, I would come out with some serious injuries. And it's not gatekeeping, as some people would like to argue. It's a genuine concern for the safety of the other people in the list. Whilst I want to defeat the enemy team, my opponent team, I have no intention of hospitalising half of them. I won't take away some form of warm, fuzzy feeling because they can no longer walk properly. I'd sooner have a genuinely decent competition, a hard struggle, and win over that way, in the knowledge that in the next round they'll give someone else the same treatment I'd given them. But yeah, some of the kit, for instance, in display in that particular photo was atrocious. It wasn't particularly brilliant when it first came in 4 years ago, but now I would not let a new fighter fight in that, even in a small local affair.
I was going to say, is that mild as well?
Yes. Yeah. So all of that is mild 2 mil splinter steel. So excusing the fact that it weighed about 45 kilos, including the brig, the skirt, and everything else in there, it was just ineffective at what it was attempting to achieve. Beautiful for reenactors, if that's what you're into, wonderful, crack on. But for a genuine combat sport, it's not fit for purpose.
No,
And
not at all.
yourself, George, what are your thoughts on this intro part? Let's get a picture of you in your first kit to complete the cycle there.
Yes. So this was this is a mixture of different secondhand pieces that I'd kind of bolted together to create a kit for training in. And just to be clear, when it comes to authenticity, it doesn't particularly matter what you train in. Like, I didn't at that point have the money to get my own full kit. So I just thought, well, if I'm training for the sport, I might as well, get my stuff on order in bits and pieces and just buy whatever I can to get myself actually in there and fighting. So everything about it looks atrocious. And to be fair, it was ill-fitted. It pretty much only the gauntlets were supposed to go together on that kit. The helmet the cage on the nasal ended up breaking from an arming sword strike.
That's not
yeah, it was buggish, but still, there are definitely better kits, and certainly what does tend to ring true is the safety aspect. So different kit elements from different periods of time were designed to specifically go with each other and go together and fit as one sort of one total unit, as it were. So if you start picking and choosing stuff, sure, you can make the world's most bomb-proof armor by taking 16th century shoulders and mixing it together with other stuff and then just yanking a nasal on top. But you're starting to get into the realms of fantasy looking armor, and I do think it's important to maintain visual standards, which is a good a good part of what people kind of use against HMB sort of in other Western martial art communities is, oh god, look at them, they look trash, look how awful their kit is, etc., etc. I think maintaining some good kit standards kind of helps to limit that effect, and sort of actually, rather than gatekeeping, gets people who are interested in the whole Western martial arts thing coming in and giving Bohurt a go, because it doesn't look awful.
So I think a really good point George just raised there is when you said, like, when I first started and when I was training, I just put a kit together to train. Well, some people have the perception that AC is this big bad wolf that says you can't have fun. That's not the case. This kit is very expensive, and if talking to your AC rep prevents you from spending $3 to $4 grand on kit that you then can't use, then that is the most profitable conversation you've probably had in your life.
Yeah.
And the second stuff is, like, we're not gatekeeping in the sense that you're not allowed to play unless you wear the shiny kit I'd like you to wear. If you want to train, if you want to go to local tournaments, or if you've no intention of doing anything outside of the local club scene, crack on. Broadly speaking, you can wear a broad array of equipment and it won't matter. But if you want to go to the larger international flights, if you want to go to the Masters, if you want to go to Battle of the Nations, then you need a decent standard of kit. And that's not just so you look good, but that's also so you're safe. So as George pointed out, a lot of the kit I was wearing when I first started was mild steel. If I wore that now and went to the Masters or the Battle of the Nations, I'd be taken off in a stretcher. Whereas at the time, it was perfectly safe, because the level of the sport was at then very different to the level of the sport was at now. The amount of people who could hit me hard enough for me to genuinely feel pain 4 years ago, relatively limited. And the weapons they were using, again, are limited. Whereas now, the training, the technique, it's all developed with the sport. And if you walk in that equipment, you're going to get seriously hurt. And the AC is as much about you being able to do this sport next week as well as this one, as much as it is about you being looking for peace whilst you're doing it.
So, like I said, there it is about safety, and we're looking at your kit here. Silly little things like, it's got to be anatomically shaped. What's the point in that? Why can't I use these cheap drain pipes? But it is safety, like what you've got on your shins there, because it's not shaped. If someone hits you quite hard on the shin, it's not going to dissipate the force like arm's designed to.
No, it'll crack your shin.
It's just going to fold in.
Yeah.
That is just going to fold 100%. In.
And if you look at Ed's knees to my left in the photos you're looking at it, I'm sure you have no objection to me raising this. As you look at the leather cuffs just underneath his knee cuffs, the reason they're there is because they were riveted on the night before, because we realised he had gaps in his armour. And they, again, are mild steel riveted to a piece of leather, riveted to his knee cuffs. One, it's not authentic, it just isn't. And two, it's not a good way of fixing that problem.
There's a reason it's not authentic.
Yeah, this is the other thing. There's a lot of things that are authentic for a good reason. So if you look at the later end of our kit era, so like the 13 to like the 1400s especially, a lot of that kit is near perfect for Bohurt. And the reason for that is because in their tournaments, in their field fights, they weren't doing something overly dissimilar to us, excusing the fact that we're not being jousted at by people on horses with lances, so jousting, but charged at. And they don't have spears they can thrust at us with. The hack, the slash, and the chaos of the melee is broadly parallel to that period. So that's why the armor works so well. But if you start to take armor from early periods and mash it in there, or crude armor from that period and mash it in there, as I say, the safety just kind of drops away. I'm not one to sit down and lecture health and safety regulations or do this or do that. I just want to be able to walk in there, and I want to be able to walk out when I'm done.
And equally, I want there to be the level of security about it that I can go in and fight properly against my opponents without having to worry about them wearing kit that's such a low quality.
Yeah,
I'm going to cave them in.
Oh yeah. I absolutely hate seeing stuff like that, because there's the gaps usually appear in sort of poor fitted, poorly made kit. The gaps usually appear in the sort of areas that are weaker on well-made kit. So it's like the difference between you getting a bit of a sting right under the kneecap, or you getting a falchion straight to your bone. If that's there, I'm not always looking at where I'm striking, because you've got to be looking about, making sure that you're not getting charged. You might
trying to see where everyone else is.
Yeah. So you're not always going to see it if it opens up. And I don't want to send someone home in an ambulance, like Piers said.
No, there's something that Tim spoke to me about in the past, is when he sees himself as a pole arms chap, he's not just an actor, he's also like the safety coordinator. So when he sees someone and he sees a massive fleshy gap, he doesn't just swing his two-handed axe straight in there. He'll take the cold blade and he'll press it into the gap where the flesh is, just as a polite reminder, this is going to hurt, please sit down. But that's because he's a conscientious individual and a genuinely nice guy. Whereas if his modus operandi was to genuinely hurt people and put them out of the sport, then he'd have more than enough opportunities to do just that.
Yeah. So above and beyond that, I think some of the animosity towards AC comes from some time ago. So like when we all got into the sport, you guys might not have had the same problem as me. You have your own reenactment backgrounds. I didn't come from reenactment. So I would ask, can I use this kit? And they go, yeah, if it's authentic. And I go, but what does that mean? I think it is. This picture looks right, doesn't it? And they go, no, go away. And whereas opposed these days, we have guides upon guides written specifically for it. Your wall group has 5 bars. It must have this. It cannot have that. There are pictures. Whereas back when we first got into it, it was just like, is my kit authentic? I don't know. Is it authentic? And I think that created a lot of animosity, because there was nothing to pre-check against, and it was all just opinions rather than rules.
As George will happily attest, me and him have both come across people on forums spouting old myths and legends from a time long past. Oh, AC said I couldn't wear this for these reasons, even though it exists and it's historical. And I said, all right, give us proof. Like, show us what you're on about to start with, and then we'll talk about it. And majority they just disappear into nothingness, or the reason they've been told they're not allowed to wear it because it's bloody dangerous to do so.
There's stuff like, for instance, the René d'Anjou perforated breastplates that you see. I personally don't think it's a safety issue because there's no thrusting in the sport, but it certainly wouldn't be an authenticity issue to not be allowed to wear those. It'd be kind of individual events discretion on whether or not the marshals were like, right, this is unsafe, so I'm not going to let you wear that.
So the René d'Anjou, for people who are not aware, if you ever see any pictures of breastplates with literal holes drilled through the front and the back of them, it'll almost like Swiss cheese. We'll send an image to buy so we can put it up in the thread, but that is what we're on about. It looks like someone has just created it into almost a honeycomb effect. It's like they are maximum safety, minimum waste, which a good chunk of what the sport is we're running towards is that. But if someone's not tempered that properly and it crunches in on you, it's not going to be pleasant.
Bad news bears. But yes, I think we're into a space now where authenticity had to rip the plaster off and put rules out there. They're there now. They're going to have upset some people.
Yeah.
But I think the responsibility of authenticity is to stop future mistakes rather than coddle past mistakes.
Yeah.
The rules are out there now. You can adapt to them or
yeah.
not.
Yeah, and this is the other thing, is if every nation should by right have an AC rep or someone near as damn it to, and they should be able to give you clear, concise answers as to the yes or the no and the reasons behind it. And if they can't go to the AC board themselves and they'll talk to you, there is an onus on two parties here. There's an onus on the AC board to be able to discuss in clear and plain language what the problems are and how to correct them. And then there's also the onus on the individual when you're about to spend, let's say, $4,000 of kit. Actually, can I wear this? Is this all right? And if they say no, then bloody listen. Don't go spending $4,000 on kit that you said no to, and then be surprised and upset that they'll say no again once you've spent the money. The amount of money you've spent is not one thing or the other as far as they're concerned.
Yeah. You can't just when there's a sort of set definition and a set standard, you can't just expect other people to make allowances for you.
But
just because you spent a lot of money. Yeah. It's kind of daft, and I'm really glad that they're starting to, they have pretty much finished most of the documentation that they're creating. I think what we got left, Greaves.
And even those they've hinted to and given people good guidance for. And that's the other thing, well raised by George, is people are given a lot of time to be dealing with this. They're given 2-3 years to deal with their kit. And I'm not being funny, gents, but we've been doing this for 4 years a pop each at least. And I've been through 3 sets of kit in 4 years. I don't know about you.
If you're fighting regularly, which you should be if you're aspiring to get to Battle of the Nations or any of the big tournaments, I mean, your kit should be pretty much on its last legs after 2 years.
Conversely, you'll probably go through less kit if you pay attention to authenticity in the first place and get
good
kit.
True.
You're quite right.
Again, we'll say it again, buy once or buy twice. If you pay attention to authenticity and get anatomical, articulated, hardened steel, that's going to last a lot longer than drain pipe mild on felt.
Well, I think we can all sit here and preach to the difference of how the difference in your movement, difference in the weight of your kit. If you ignore AC for a second and just go for the sport, you move far better, it's far lighter, it's far easier to bloody maintain and keep clean than got that godforsaken splint with riveted onto felt that holds the water in against the steel to begin with. Like, the difference is absolutely monumental. Like, as far as the sport's concerned, and then you throw in the AC advantages on top of it. Why wouldn't you buy it correctly the first time?
And like, you do just look better. Like, look at me there. To be honest, I painted my helmet so I could see myself in videos. It looks stupid. Those gauntlets, they're horrible. The sword looks stupid.
Something I will say though is the helmet in itself is not a bad helmet, and it's not inauthentic. It's a very smart helmet. The problem is painting it. And there's 2 reasons why there's no painting in the sport for us in helmets. Twofold. So one, various people have attempted to hide the very crude construction of the nature of their helmet by painting them and using polyfiller on them. And so it just disappears. Like, so it up to the late 1200s, everyone's helmets are painted. There's heraldry, there's like geometric designs, there's all sorts, and then it just vanishes. There are no manuscripts to show it.
It comes back a bit later, sort of during Maximilian's era.
Yeah, you get the beautifully etched armor with acid etched and all.
I mean just flat out painted. Sallets in particular come back.
Apologies, I just remember the one you're on about.
Yeah. But that was more of a sort of showpiece thing for tournaments, supposedly. We're not really sure, but there is. That is documented. So if it's documented and you want, for some reason, to wear a black sallet in a Bohurt, not that I'd recommend it, you could paint one of those. It's
long as
you've
you
just
have
got to
the
have
rest of the kit
documentation
goes
for
with
it.
it. Yeah. And it's not even as though AC is just you have to be 100% by the books. The safety does override it at times. Point in case,
Oh, yeah.
the photo we have in front of us now, Barney, with his mittens on.
Yes,
They weren't great.
No, nor are fingered gauntlets. The only people I've ever known to get broken hands in this sport have either been wearing those mittens or fingered gauntlets.
Yeah,
Whereas
this is we're getting into the
majority
realms of when can authenticity be too powerful and make too many points, but they're making concessions all the time for safety. Like you say, mittens. We can all wear mittens all of the time rather than having to wear fingered gauntlets.
Yeah, and most of those mittens don't show up for 150 to 200 years after some of the kit people are wearing. If you're wearing early 100 years or like kit with like an early protonasal and things like that, those gauntlets do not show up for another 150 years. But we're saying to you, have those with that kit because it's a really good way of not getting your hands broken. Those like overlapping plates articulated and like a really absolutely bomb-proof protection for your hand. Most people have got jobs they need to go back to after a tournament. And most people need their hands for those jobs. And like, this is a really good way and a concession, as you point out, to making sure that they can go back to work afterwards and return to the tournament the day after if they want to.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Eye bars and all sorts. They make the concessions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I generally agree about the eye bar part. I think when it comes to there's fighters who like perforated plate on their eyes and stuff like that. I'm not a fan of that. I think that's a way to get stuff knocked into your eyes because it's gonna, particularly if it has to be painted black, paint's gonna chip off. It's gonna end up going into your helmet. You're not gonna like it. One eye bar is more than enough.
There's nothing in the sport weapon-wise small enough, to fit through that gap of the eye bar.
No,
because
it's
the sword crossguard. This is it. The sword crossguard. It's only allowed to be 3 centimeters past the end of your knuckle anyway. And if you're wearing a helmet where the edge of the steel and your eyeball are within 3 centimeters of each other, you're not wearing a helmet that's fit for this sport. The concussive blows require proper padding and a proper fitting helmet.
Okay, for those of you at home, this breastplate, whatever you called it, there's an image of it with the holes in it looking rather dubious. What was the name of that one again?
It's from the René d'Anjou Book of Tournaments. I can't remember the exact name of the book now.
Okay.
But yeah, basically it's an example of period sport optimized armor because back in the day they'd fight with like wooden clubs, I believe it was, with no thrusting. So what you're going to do if you want to lighten your kit up to perform more effectively, you just cut bits of the plate out.
Yeah, sport optimization is fully historical. People have never been that.
Yeah. No, absolutely. There's a lot of examples of say sport optimized, but tournament optimized poleaxe kits for poleaxe fighters that are more sort of 15th century tank than armor. Yeah.
So we've spoke quite a lot now about authenticity, why it's good, the concessions they've made, and I'm not an authenticity fanboy by any means. I used to be quite the opposite. But at what point does authenticity go too far, do you believe? Like, for example, I got a bit wound up when I was told I had to paint the bolt on the back of my shield black. Like, it's a small object that no one's ever going to see. I was like, with all due respect, can you get a life?
Yeah. That stuff is irritating. Personally, I think that generally the only way that they can go too far is that if they start sacrificing safety measures for authenticity. The big one that comes to mind was the neck rondels thing from a few years ago.
Yeah.
Where everyone had to wear them underneath their Aventails, and all of a sudden they stopped working.
Yeah, I had a lad get very badly hurt from that. That was a poor decision.
I think that. But in hindsight, from that is really, no one should have been wearing neck rondels in the first place, and they should have been wearing lobster tails. But
Yes.
it was all to do with the progression of the sport, and at that stage, the sport wasn't at the point where everyone could get hold of lobster tails, or they weren't being manufactured as widely.
Especially not on the morning of the tournament when you turn up and be told you can't wear them.
No,
exactly.
Well, this is the other thing. Yeah. So authenticity has recently, as far as I'm concerned, done a cracking job. We've given people years in advance to adapt to this, and then it's years in advance with tournament levels. So in 2 years, so of 2021, the bomb-proof griffins that have been created, they will no longer be accepted at the Battle of the Nations. Now that decision was announced last year, so that's given people 2 years to find themselves a new helmet. Now helmets can be quite expensive bits of kit, so that's a decent time period to be able to get on with that. But anything like that where they've turned around and said, okay, at the next Masters or at the next Battle of the Nations, which are both in theory the top end tournaments that you will ever attend, you need to have kit to this level. But below those, the authenticity requirements shed away in loads. So if you want to go to a local event with a few clubs just knocking about, getting some experience of a steel on steel fight and getting used to just the atmosphere and what you have to do and why and the chaos of it all, it's fine. Whereas if you want to go to the Battle of Nations or if you want to go to a Masters tournament, it's not acceptable.
There's even concessions
those
made
people who are doing those tournaments, it should be a layer above it.
There's even concessions made for new countries joining Battle of the Nations, isn't there? So I think if it's your first year at Battle of the Nations as a country, they will give you a bit of leeway.
Yeah, really well made. Really good point, well made there. Is the fact that it's not just pedantry for the sake of it, of just, oh no, well I said, and therefore. It's, look, you're new to this sport, we get that. It's going to take a while to get the correct kit, get talking to the correct armourers, get all that stuff sorted. Just show up. We'd love to see you. You get a really good idea from coming up exactly what decent kit looks like and who to get it from. The amount of traders who are at Battle of Nations is just innumerable.
Oh yeah, and they're often cheaper there.
Especially on the last day.
And the
no
armourer,
one wants to take that kit home with them.
The armourer can make measurements for you whilst
you can't get exactly. You cannot get a bad fitting piece of kit if the man who is making it is taking the measurements in front of you there and then.
Yeah, it's always the big fear, isn't it? But do you think there's anything else that authenticity can go a bit far with? Like something on the back of a shield, nobody sees it's not too much of an issue. Or I've been told that I can't have grip tape on the handle of my sword, and the crowd ain't going to see the handle of my sword.
If your hand's wrapped around it, who's going to be able to tell, surely? But I'd sooner have the complaints of authenticity being the small niggling things than the large genuine requirements. So for instance, they told me I have to wear finger gauntlets and now my hands are broken and I can't go back to work.
Yeah.
I'd sooner it be I have to paint this bolt. That seems bloody ridiculous to me, but paint is cheap.
Yeah, and it's a 5-minute job. Or you didn't even have to paint it. It was just grab an angle grinder and make the bolt flush.
I think the first time I got told it, I just put some tape over it and sound. But
yeah.
There are things that I don't think are.
But then the counter is the people making those shields should be acutely aware of the authenticity and get it all sorted and get it done. Like the shields we've been buying recently off of JP, no problems at all. Yeah, absolutely spot on. The ones we brought before those, they were issues. Yeah. Sorry, you were saying.
So from there, an issue for me is I had no background in reenactment, medieval stuff, or whatever. I didn't know how to research what I was looking at as such. I didn't know what was a good. I'd show things, people say, "So this is legit. I can use this," and they go, "Oh, no, you're thick." This is not an acceptable way to research it. I just didn't understand primary, tertiary sources, whatever, what was good or what I was looking at. So I think, George, you sent us this.
It is almost a separate language you have to learn.
Yeah, kind of.
Which I understand put a lot of people off.
So what is this you've given us?
It's a stylization of sources.
Yeah. So this is a great sort of source for early 15th century armor, and it is from the Spoleto I can't remember what it's called.
The illustrations are beautiful.
Yeah, it's it's got a special name that's eluded me. Anyway, in that there is actually, I think, the only depiction of a melee from this sort of period that most fighters tend to create their
Careful now.
create their harnesses around. And it shows one of the great things about authenticity, which is tabards. What you wear under a tabard doesn't particularly matter. If you prefer the side fastening brigs, you can wear those. If you like the full 15th century Leeds and Wimbledon style brigandines, you can wear those. If it's covered by your tabard, it doesn't matter, so long as it's not something that alters your proportions, like, I don't know, Space Marine shoulders or something like that. It shows a good area for getting a bit of leeway in your kit. As long as it's actually actively protected. Don't go getting a brig with no back plates just because you think you're never going to get hit in the back.
Because you will.
Yeah, you will.
The first time you get hit in the back of it, last time you compete in the sport.
So, yes, looking for sources, you've got to recognise the difference between a primary source where it was created.
Yeah.
Then, like this was a painting done by a medieval man of a medieval man, or extant kit of this is a recognised authentic piece of equipment that existed then
in a museum,
and then
in the Leeds Army, in the Wallace collection.
Or
extant kit is your best. It's your best sort of source. Extant kit allows you to get a real idea of what the shapes were like, particularly when it comes to clap visors. There's loads of visors that go onto clap visor helmets. You get a good sort of eye for judging the shape, and the shape helps the function of the helmet. Like, it's all designed to deflect stuff away from your face. There's obviously stuff that's authentic that is bad for sport. Hound skulls come to mind. It's just a giant lever.
Yep. It is like when someone grabs hold of that nose and pushes, that's it, you're gone.
Yes, but if you want to fight in one,
but they're just not fit for the sport.
Yeah, if you want to fight in one, go for it. But it's not something I'd recommend.
Yeah, and then there's
bad sources as well. But there are extant pieces of kit that the Victorians have moulded together and stuck together because it looked pretty to them.
Yes.
There's a really good example of a visored barbute.
Yeah.
Well, the visor didn't belong to the barbute originally. These are two pieces out of an armory. An antiques dealer has thrown together, gone, bugger to it, that looks about right. And they'll flog it on to some unexpected nobleman or someone with too much money and too little sense who doesn't understand the difference, so they can add it to their antiquities collection. And it's now sat in a museum, but it's sat in a museum, and the museum understands that these two don't go together, but it's part of the history of the item itself, that someone has thrown them together. The problem is we don't want to be replicating that within the sport.
No.
Yes, so look for it. Look for anyone sort of doubting the authenticity of a piece of kit. Usually, if it's on a museum site or inventory or something like that, it'll say made sort of, I don't know, 1440 or whatever, and then restored with a Victorian date.
Yes.
That's usually the case.
Adapted 1922.
Yeah.
Well, ask the AC committee, anyone within it, they'll happily answer questions. And there are pages all over social media who focus on exactly the kit that we're talking about. They do a cracking job of it. Just ask questions. And if someone turns around and tells you, no, I'm not answering that, you're an idiot, then find someone else. Like, they're not fit to be part of the AC committee.
Yeah. If you want a good page for armor. Sorry. If you want a good,
my word, yes.
Yeah, if you want a good page for armor, there is a 15th century European armor group on Facebook. There's a really active chap on there called Augusto, and his job is literally deciphering images from manuscripts and creating like pictures of what the armor from those
Just-
manuscripts
it's
look
a
like.
spectacular armor smith, and the man knows his business in and side and out.
Yeah,
And that's 15th century with the Roman numerals, mind you, not just with the like 15 doesn't 1 5.
Oh,
So
yeah,
it's
yeah.
easy to find for everyone. But yeah, no, it is an absolutely cracking job. It's a really good group, and they'll answer questions from anyone anywhere. So like HEMA guys will show up, redactors will show up, HMB, IMTF will show up because I've got a question about this. Okay, like the helmet, yes, but here's the problems with it, and this is what I'd look at. These are the stylization issues, and it means you can have a more intelligent conversation with the AC.
Now, if we talk about bad sources, things that you shouldn't look at are modern drawings. I think you mentioned Osprey books, George, or
yes,
anything
yeah,
that was, that's not a source. That's a drawing a bloke's made recently. That's no more authentic than me drawing a
which has
Roman
been
legionnaire.
Yeah, so the thing with the Osprey books is there, or any type of source of that type of level, it's things that have been influenced by a collection of sources and archaeological finds they've seen, and they've taken those, melded them together, and they've gone, okay, so this is what it looked like. When actually there could be a spiritual difference. Like I remember at Osprey where they've taken an axe from Italy and a helmet they found in Turkey with a piece of armor they found in Egypt. You go, well, this could have all been together at the same time. Who knows? So yes and no.
yeah.
It's like, yes, they could have been together, but the way you're depicting this, which is this is the standard kit of the era, that's not the case. Like, we don't have the evidence to support that. I was like, and if you begin to, when you become more versed in armor, and you can begin to look at the typology of the lines and the anatomical like flow that goes with it, you can begin to pick out that actually these are issues. Like that doesn't go with this for the following reason. The pleats are different, the fluting's different. The materials
Generally,
used and
they're
the culture
fine.
that's behind it.
Generally, they're fine. I mean, the pictures are usually, especially in the more recent books, perfectly serviceable. But the problem is it's not a source. It's just an illustration in a book. You know, if you want a
Osprey, they do
source,
have their sources at the back of their book, and that is what it's worth looking at.
that's what
So
you
if you
should
see an
be
Osprey
using.
illustration, go, my word, that looks like the ticket for me. Then brilliant. Back of the pages, that illustration is based on these drawings or these images from museum pieces. Look at the museum pieces. Look at the archaeological finds. That's what you need to base it on.
And the last and the least reliable source as to whether or not your kit is authentic is the word of the smith that made it.
Oh, for real.
Do not listen to
Yes.
them.
I would.
Their job is to sell.
They'll sell you
kit.
anything. Yeah.
If they,
That's what their job is based on.
they of course will believe that their work is great.
Mm.
Maybe they don't. Maybe they do. What they're more interested in is selling it. This isn't
Yeah.
all smiths, of course, but
No.
you might have got.
And it's not that we have a negative view towards Smiths. Some of them are absolute artists, and the kit they make is divine. Some of the divine kit they make is not historically accurate.
Yeah.
But you do not take a review of any item off the salesman that's trying to sell it.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. Always ask. Buy nice or
And
buy
it's the same
twice.
argument for weapons. The same argument for weapons is for armor, is for anything else in sport. Ask questions about it. Don't just rush in. Don't think, oh, well, this bargain's going to go, and
Yeah.
they'll still be selling that tomorrow because they've still got a mortgage to pay. They've still got children to feed. Find out about that piece of armor. It's like, okay, I've seen this. Is that all right to wear with these legs? Is that all right to wear with this shield, this sword? And build up an understanding of what a kit from that period would look like, whether or not it'd be any decent, and if it is all right to wear that sword, if it is all right to wear with that breastplate to use with that sword, actually, how functional is that within the sport?
Yeah.
Like a full breastplate is very protective, but it restricts motion. Whereas some of the brigs, carazinas, or whatever you'd like to call them, give you good protection in the sport and brilliant motion. But at the time, were brilliantly arrow resistant, so the solid steel cuirass was favoured because it was arrow resistant. Well, we didn't have to deal with many longbowmen and crossbows in our sport, so actually, the cuirassina with more flexibility is better for the sport than the full breastplate, which doesn't shift or move when you do.
So you've briefly touched on something there that does make researching difficult as well, and that's the muddy naming conventions used on medieval stuff. I mean, it's rife in pole arms.
Yes.
It's absolutely terrible trying to research any pole
Yeah,
arm.
it is.
but every piece of kit has got so many different names and so many different languages, and everybody's got an opinion. All of the names are modern names compared to historical names. Like, no one called it an arming sword back in the day. They didn't call it a heater shield because they didn't have irons.
Called it a sword.
Yeah.
So
it's
a really good example of that is wolf ribs. Yeah, wolf ribs are known as like, I think it's fishbone helmets and all sorts, because they're just, it looks like a splay in front of the main bassinet of the helmet. But there's a whole collective family of terms used to refer to the exact same piece of equipment. It is desperately difficult to try and work out, as a layman coming in with no knowledge and no one to speak to, how you'd refer to that piece of equipment.
Yeah.
But there should be an AC rep in your community. Should.
Yeah, and always. So the bottom line is always ask and get a variety of opinions. I always say never only have one coach in anything. Get a variety of opinions on everything, because you've got authenticity, you've got effectiveness, you've got
teammates as well. Like, you can just pretty much every teammate who competes in HMB will know some of the authenticity stuff, like the big things like eye bars, clasps on top of nasals and clap visors, and mandatory saboteurs these days. Well, like, people just know that sort of thing because they'll have gone through it themselves if they've got their own kit.
Yeah, and they're all going to know when their knowledge runs out.
Understands how this works and why, because otherwise they'll have equipment reviews.
Yeah. Okay. So, do you lads have any other big burning issues on the AC side of things that you need people at home to be aware of?
Barney frozen, or is it just me? Barney's back. Sorry.
No, it was just you for a bit there.
Apologies.
So the big thing for me is that all of these rules are publicly available on the Bohurt League website. They are there all the time. I'll link them in the description below, and just make sure that you are familiar.
And there's an AC publication thread where everything is listed. And if there's anything you've got any questions or queries about, put the question up. I was once asked if zippers was fit like 13th century. I'd sooner have that question than find out in a tournament that what are you doing? I'm zipping my brick up. This is it. But you're better off asking the question. You're much better off asking the question than spending money.
Rip the plaster off and ask the dumb question. Seriously, dumb questions are better than dumb kit.
Yes. I mean, have you got a photo of the earlier Battle of Nations stuff that the UK team used to wear?
Yeah. So was this 2013? I think you said, George.
Yeah, I think that is France 2013. I think it's a still from the BBC show that got most people who are into the sport.
Yeah. No, I saw it. It's one of the things that kind of forced me. I thought, you know what, now's the time.
Yeah, same.
Was it Carcassonne or was it Belmont?
No, it's Angemort. I can't remember how you say it. Don't speak French.
But yeah, if we compare that to, this was the Wild West of authenticity, wasn't it? Where it was just opinions. And then we compare it to something a bit more modern, and it's night and day.
So this is the antithesis of the wolf rig. So if you sit there and look at that photo, the vast majority of people, the front line of fighters, excusing Jake Coles on the far right there, is Wolfrid wearing white company, as shown by the heraldry around their neck there. Far right, of course, is Stansby. But excusing that, there are clap visors, there are nasals, there are griffins, and there are great helms, but all of them, barring the nasal on the far right, and actually the one on the far left, but we won't get into that. The kit there has made a significant improvement if you compare 4 years ago. So if you look at mine and Barney's kit, where Barney's wearing those plate mittens and I'm wearing those godforsaken gutter splint armor, well, this armor is anatomical, it is solid steel, so it's lighter, it's easy to maintain, it's far better with protection, and especially with your hands. And it looks a lot smarter. The advent of full steel plate across the sport has brought things up a couple of notches, and everyone looks the better for it, and it lasts a lot longer.
Yep.
Like I used to have to bend my splint back into place after every fight.
Sometimes when you still
Every
wear them.
single fight. Yeah. Whereas now, I can fight a tournament, go home, look at it, think, it'll be all right. And then fight a few more tournaments and go, actually, I do need to replace that rivet.
I mean,
And
after a
it's lot less
tournament,
hassle.
after a tournament like Battle of the Nations, your kit is always going to look a bit
Worse for
mullet.
wear.
I mean, I'm on the front row of that picture there, looking at my feet with the wolf rib on, and that helmet was brand spanking new 2 days before this picture. I'm wearing it. It has
left of Jake.
Yes, that's me.
So for everyone who doesn't know who these people are, there's a man with a two-handed axe standing there in the front line with a wolf rib. That's Jake Coles, the captain of Gloucester Armoured Combat. Brilliant chap, absolutely knows his business. One to the left there is George wearing that wolf rib. It's taller gent, and that wolf rib looks like it's seen some fighting.
Well, it's seen some Russia in the last.
Yeah.
Those two perfectly parallel strikes. That's like a
photo from the 150. Yeah, this is a photo from the 150 versus 150. There's a banner in the far right hand corner, which is I think the Varangian banner.
No, that's our dragon banner.
Is that the
that's
same
the red and black dragon banner? Yeah.
Dragon banner. Apologies. With Serbia behind us and the Germans behind them, and we formed one block, and the Russians formed the block on the left, and they formed the block on the right. But
everyone's kit's always going to look a bit mullered especially after a tournament like that. But generally, the actual shaping of bits of equipment is
holds.
We can just agree that the
a lot better.
Authenticity has made things look so much better.
Yes. Yeah. Once you've been in the sport for a year or two and you see the transition, you realise actually this really was for the best.
It's not too bad.
And
the other things taken into account.
The final point is these are the rules of the sport. You abide by them. If I compete in jiu-jitsu, my favourite gi is green. I can't wear that at a competition. You can only wear black, white, or blue. So I'll wear a black, white, or blue gi. If you go to Olympic fencing, they all wear white. If you can't just rock in there and say, I'd like to wear some Ali G camouflage because I'd look cool. You can't. If you go to any sport, cricket, you can't just wear black so you stand out. They've all got their cultures.
Everyone's got their uniform, so to speak, in their culture.
Yeah. And if you don't like it, okay. Sorry.
There are other leagues. There are other leagues where authenticity isn't a factor, and feel free to fight in them. As I say, personally, I've fought in both.
Of course, because you're an IMCF fighter in your own right, aren't you?
Yeah. And well, HMB certainly looks a lot better than IMCF at the moment. Just in terms of visual, like kit appearance.
Yeah.
Although most fighters obviously do both. Particularly when it comes to European dudes. A lot of the Polish team are also on the Polish IMCF team. Same guys as Battle of the Nations. A lot of people do tend to do both.
All the more reason to abide by the strictest rules then, isn't it?
Yeah.
So you can do both with no problems. Yeah.
But if you want your fancy
the point
kit,
you made is this is the last day of the battle. So AC is not there every second of every day. It's just to begin with, we'd like you to look this way. We'd like your tabards to be smart. We'd like your equipment to look like it's been well maintained and well looked after. We understand on the last day it's going to look bloody awful comparatively. But if we start off with a high standard, whatever it slips to is a great deal better than if you start with a low standard, and a lot of people get hurt because of that low standard.
And injured.
Yeah.
True.
Okay, lads, I think that pretty much covers all the points we need to cover. And hopefully for those of you at home, it's let you behind the curtain a bit and show it's not such a big bad guy after all. And there are ways to work with it rather than just against it. So thank you, George. Thank you, Piers, for all your opinions and all your help with bringing this out there. And for the rest of you at home,
absolute pleasure.
Please like and subscribe, and you'll be hearing from us again very soon.